Hi, I'm Sarah Mitchell. I'm 32 years old, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the go-to hostess in my family. No kids, a spotless home, and a heart always ready to give. But after one too many thankless holidays, I finally said enough. Today I'll tell you how one simple no ignited a family feud, led to the most satisfying revenge, and taught everyone a lesson about respect and boundaries. Make sure you stick around, you'll want to see how this all unfolded. My name is Sarah Mitchell. I'm 32 single and I live in a cozy 2-bedroom cottage on Maple Street. No children, no pets, and a spotless record when it comes to clean countertops and uncluttered floors. It's exactly the kind of home everyone, especially my family, loves to raid during the holidays. My younger sister Allison is 29 and mother to 3 wild toddlers under 6. She and her husband Mark live in a 2-bedroom apartment that's basically a toy tornado zone, half-eaten goldfish crackers under the couch, crayons stuck in the heating vents, a broken puzzle piece glued to the wall. When their washing machine broke last month, they piled clothes in garbage bags in the corner of the living room. Every time I walked in, I felt like I'd stepped into a daycare center run by tornado squirrels. Growing up, Allison and I were close. We shared a bedroom painted sky blue, whispered secrets under the covers, and promised we'd always have each other's back. But 5 years ago, she got married, had kids, and fell headfirst into nonstop chaos. Mom and Dad, who live an hour north, usually say they can't handle all that noise anymore, which means, of course, they rely on me to host holidays. Year after year, I found myself cooking an 8-hour feast, setting up a craft corner with glitter glue for Allison's kids, arranging seating for 12 adults, and buying extra wine just in case. I learned to anticipate my nephew's peanut butter meltdown at 3 p.m., Allison's husband Mark's off-key renditions of holiday carols, and Mom's thinly veiled disappointment when I ran out of the fancy prosciutto-wrapped asparagus. No one ever asked what they could bring beyond paper plates or soda. I remember the first time I noticed the pattern clearly. It was Christmas 2 years ago. I'd spent the morning baking 3 pies, 2 loaves of rosemary bread, and mixing the perfect cranberry orange relish. At noon, Allison swaggered in holding her baby girl by one arm, a sticky muffin in the other hand. She set the baby on my coffee table where she promptly grabbed my vintage holiday coasters and threw them at her brother. He squealed. Allison shrugged at me as if this was normal. Then she flopped onto my couch, completely oblivious to the pie skins I was cleaning off the floor. That afternoon, I overheard Mom telling Aunt Joyce how helpful I was to host again. Joyce laughed, saying, "What would they do without Sarah?" I never interrupted. I just felt a cold bubble of resentment rise in my chest. In that moment, I understood my kindness had become their unspoken obligation, like I'd signed a contract I never agreed to. Still, the holidays felt special to me. I liked the anticipation, the smells, the laughter once it started, but keeping that facade of perfect hostess cost me. I spent Christmas Eve scrubbing mashed potatoes out of the rug and wrapping the kids' leftover crafts in plastic to hide the glitter footprints the next morning. When the last guest left, I stood alone in the empty living room, blinking at the tacky streamers and sticky chairs. My cheeks hurt from smiling all day, my feet ached, my back throbbed. I'd put everything into that dinner, and they'd taken it all for granted. During the drive home, exhausted, brimming with unspoken frustration, I realized something important. I wasn't getting anything out of this except burnout. There was no genuine thank you, no offer to help set the table or wash dishes. Just an invisible toll taken from me year after year. A few weeks later at brunch with my best friend Linda, I finally said it out loud. I'm done being the family's holiday maid. Linda sat up so fast I thought she'd spill her latte. "But where would they go? Who else has a house that tidy?" she asked. I shrugged. "I don't know, it's their problem. I'm tired of feeling used." That conversation lit a spark. I realized that setting boundaries wasn't a betrayal, it was self-respect. And if my family hadn't noticed my efforts before, maybe they'd only appreciate me once I withdrew them. So I started imagining alternatives, renting a cabin somewhere, booking a hotel suite, even going solo to a quiet Airbnb with pine tree views and room service. Already I felt lighter, excited even. For the first time in years, the holidays felt like mine again. But deep down, I knew saying no wouldn't be easy. Allison would be furious. Mom would guilt trip me. They'd paint me as the villain on Facebook. Our family chat would blow up with accusations. Yet for every twinge of anxiety about the backlash, I felt 2 waves of relief at the thought of reclaiming my home and my sanity. In a few days, I'd send that message announcing, "This year, I'm opting out of hosting Thanksgiving." And then I'd watch the chaos unfold. Little did they know this quiet decision would become the most powerful act of self-liberation I'd ever taken, and the first step toward a perfectly crafted revenge. I still remember the afternoon I hit send on that fateful family group chat. Sarah. "Hey everyone, this year I'm opting out of hosting Thanksgiving. I'm feeling burnt out and need a break. Maybe next year we can rotate hosting. My finger trembled slightly as I hit enter. In that moment, the world felt strangely silent, like I'd dropped a pebble into a still pond. I didn't know whether to feel proud or terrified. Within 2 minutes, my phone buzzed. Allison via text? You're being so selfish, Sarah. You know full well I can't host 3 kids under 6 and no extra space. How could you do this? Mom calling Sarah? What did you mean by this? You're making the holidays so hard on everyone. I thought you loved us. My chest tightened. Acidic guilt pooled in my stomach, but I forced myself to stay calm. I'd rehearsed my response. I'm sorry you feel that way, Allison. I need some time off. Let's talk about a fair rotation next year. That night, I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. My mind raced through every Thanksgiving memory, the gleaming roast turkey I'd basted myself, Allison's 3-year-old flinging gravy onto my dining room rug, Mom's sigh of relief when I handed her a paper napkin instead of asking her to help. I realized how many tiny resentments I'd swallowed without ever speaking up. 2 days later, Allison went ballistic on Facebook. Passive-aggressive posts filled my newsfeed. Some people just don't get what family means. When you're always the favorite, you forget there's work behind the scenes. Comments poured in. I saw Aunt Joyce writing, "Hope this is just a joke, Sarah." My sister's followers sided with her as if I'd announced the apocalypse. At work, my coworkers noticed my distracted expression. Linda slid a chocolate croissant across the table. "What's going on?" she pressed. Before I could answer, my phone pinged again. A flurry of cousin texts asking if I was okay, whether I'd reconsidered. I felt a strange mixture of vindication and vulnerability. For the first time, they noticed I was indispensable, but only because I'd removed myself. A week later, I joined a family video call and emergency meeting, apparently. I logged in to see Allison in her living room, kids whining in the background, pillows on her couch askew. Mom sat beside her, arms crossed. "Why won't you help us this year?" Allison demanded, voice cracking. "I can't do this alone. How could you?" I swallowed hard. My pulse thundered in my ears. Then I said as evenly as I could manage, "I've been doing this for years, Allison. I love you, but I need kind of holiday that doesn't leave me exhausted and resentful." "You're the mom. This is your holiday now." There was a sharp intake of breath. The line went quiet except for the muffled cries of Allison's toddler. Mom looked ready to lecture me, but something stopped her. Maybe she saw the raw honesty in my eyes. Maybe she realized how long I'd been swallowing my own needs. Over the next few days, tension mounted. Text messages flew like arrows. "Mom, you're choosing yourself over your family. That's not okay." "Allison, fine, enjoy your little retreat. But don't expect an invitation back." Meanwhile, in my own apartment, I scrubbed my counters until they shone. I washed the fine china I'd never used. I packed a suitcase not for Thanksgiving, but for a 4-day solo trip to a mountain cabin I booked on a whim. Every scrub of the sponge felt like a step toward freedom. 2 nights before Thanksgiving, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. I looked peaceful. Undeniably, I was nervous. What if my family never spoke to me again? But underneath the fear was a thrill I hadn't felt in years, excitement at the thought of reclaiming my own space, my own holiday. On Thanksgiving morning, my phone stayed silent. "No, thank you for doing this every year. No, please come back, just emptiness." I poured myself coffee, layered on a cozy sweater, and locked my door behind me. As I walked to my car, the crisp air pricked my cheeks. The road ahead felt uncharted. I didn't look back. Little did I know the real storm was brewing behind me, one that would force every family member to confront the cost of taking me for granted. And I was ready. From that moment on, nothing would ever be the same. By mid-November, the fallout from my no-hosting announcement had reached peak chaos. My family's desperation was palpable: frantic cousin texts, anguished voicemail from Mom, and Allison's increasingly frantic Facebook stories about her impossible children and nightmare holiday prep. Yet every appeal only solidified my resolve. I realized that for the first time, I held the power and I intended to use it. That weekend, I sat at my kitchen table with a hot mug of coffee and my laptop open to a list of boutique cabins in the mountains. As I scrolled through photos of stone fireplaces and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking snow-dusted pines, I felt a flicker of excitement sharpen into determination. I wasn't just escaping, it was part of a grander plan. First, I needed to ensure my absence was absolute. I double-checked my group settings, muted the family chat, and cleared my calendar. No last-minute backdown, no window for guilt. My message was final. Then I opened a new to-do list titled Thanksgiving Revenge by Retreat. Underneath, I wrote, "Book solo cabin done. Arrange spa treatment and gourmet meal delivery. Prepare social media posts. Create an invitation email to family featuring a cheeky countdown." I sipped my coffee, leaning back in my chair, and envisioned their panicked texts when they realized the chaos they'd unleashed. The key was subtlety. I wouldn't spread rumors or post snide remarks. Instead, I would craft a perfectly curated image of blissful solitude that contrasted sharply with their frantic attempts at hosting disaster. Over the next 2 days, I fine-tuned every detail. I booked a 4-night stay at Maple Pines Lodge, a remote cabin with private waterfall access and a hot stone spa tub. I scheduled a private chef to deliver a 5-course Thanksgiving dinner: truffle butternut squash soup, rosemary brown butter turkey breast, and pecan praline pumpkin pie, right to my door at 6 p.m. sharp. An hour later, a local photographer would arrive to capture me in cozy robes sipping wine by the fireplace. As I arranged these luxuries, my mind wandered back to the countless hours I'd spent doing the opposite slaving in my kitchen, wiping sticky handprints off my walls and apologizing for my sister's children when they knocked over my best candle holder. Each memory fueled my sense of righteous satisfaction. I deserved this. I owed myself this. That evening, I drafted the Great Invitation, a playful group email to extended family letting them know I was unavailable for Thanksgiving, but inviting them to witness my personal holiday transformation. The subject line read Sarah's Thanksgiving retreat countdown to Zen. You're not invited inside. I wrote, "Hello, dear family. With immense gratitude for your past attendance at my home, I have decided to delegate this year's festivities to fate. I'll be celebrating Thanksgiving at a quiet mountain retreat from November 24th to 28th, indulging in rest, relaxation, and ridiculously good food prepared by a private chef. Feel free to imagine me noshing on gourmet leftovers by a roaring fire. In my honor, I've set up a live slideshow viewable here so you can bask in the serenity you once took for granted. Next year, perhaps we'll rotate hosting duties so that each of us can experience the joys of holiday hospitality firsthand." Gobble gobble, Sarah. I debated sending it. It was bold. It was borderline taunting. But I needed them to see my transformation in real time. My calm contrasted with their frantic hosting attempts, and to understand that absence makes the heart grow restless. That night, I rehearsed mentally how I'd handle their reactions. If Allison called, I'd answer calmly, "I hope it's going well. I'm enjoying the silence." If Mom tried to guilt trip, I'd remain firm. "Boundaries are healthy, Mom. I love you, but I need to recharge." If a cousin texted begging me to return, I'd tease, "Are you sure you're ready to host without me?" Each scenario strengthened my resolve. I wasn't planning to humiliate them. I was designing a mirror to reflect their own entitlement. If they stepped in to save their Thanksgiving, they'd realize how critical my contributions had been. By Thanksgiving Eve, everything was in place. I packed my favorite cashmere blanket, downloaded my cozy winter Spotify playlist, and printed the email invitations to witness my retreat ready to forward at dawn. My heart pounded with anticipation as I set an alarm for 6 a.m., giving me time to send the email before my family awoke. As I lay in bed that night, I felt strangely light. The years of unseen labor, the unacknowledged cleanup, the burden of being the default hostess, it was all lifting. The quiet cabin promised more than just comfort. It symbolized the boundaries I'd finally drawn around my own generosity. I drifted to sleep knowing that tomorrow would mark a new holiday chapter 1, where I wasn't defined by others' expectations, but by my own choices. And so with a deep breath, I whispered to the dark room, "Let the games begin." Thanksgiving morning dawned crisp and clear. At 6:00 a.m., I woke in my cozy bedroom, heart drumming with anticipation. I slipped on slippers, wrapped myself in my favorite cashmere blanket, and opened my laptop. With a satisfied smile, I hit send on the Thanksgiving retreat email to every family member: Mom, Allison, cousins, aunts, uncles, knowing it would land in their inbox as they reached for that first cup of coffee. Within seconds, notifications began to pop up on my phone. Confused replies, angry reprimands, desperate pleas. I muted the group chat and stepped outside barefoot to feel the chill of morning grass beneath me, savoring the contrast between my calm and their chaos. By mid-morning, I had arrived at Maple Pines Lodge. The winding forest road gave way to a rustic cabin framed by evergreens dusted in frost. I pulled my suitcase over the threshold, greeted by the quiet hum of insulation and the welcome scent of cedar. A private chef's delivery arrived precisely at noon, an elegant wooden crate containing glazed chestnut soup, herb-buttered turkey roulade, and freshly baked sourdough rolls, each labeled with instructions to heat, plate, and savor. The chef lingered just long enough to arrange the dishes on the reclaimed wood dining table, then slipped away like a ghost. My heart swelled with triumphant relief. This was my masterpiece, now untouched by others' crumbs or complaints. That afternoon, I watched messages cascade onto my phone. "Please come back, we can't handle it." Is this a joke? But I refused to engage. Instead, I slipped into my robe, poured a glass of Riesling, and sank into the hot stone spa tub on the deck overlooking a frozen waterfall. Steam curled around my shoulders as I closed my eyes, listening only to my breath and the soft rush of water over granite. Every pang of guilt melted away, replaced by a glowing sense of entitlement to this moment, this luscious stillness I'd stolen back from those who'd taken it for granted. Around 3 p.m., I donned my wool sweater and mittens for a short hike. Snow crunched underfoot as I made my way through frosted pines to a hillock overlooking the valley. At the crest, I paused to capture a photo me framed by snowy trees, breath visible in the cold air, laughter frozen in a candid freeze frame. I posted it to Instagram with the caption "Thankful for quiet mornings and hot tubs," silently knowing my family would see it. The mini climax surged when I read my cousin Megan's comment, "Wow, Sarah, hope you're enjoying the piece you gave up on hosting." I smiled, knowing my absence had become their greatest upheaval. Back at the cabin, I prepared for the 5-course dinner in earnest. I plated each course like an artist. First, the chestnut soup garnished with microgreens. Next, seared salmon with citrus glaze. Then the turkey roulade with caramelized onions, followed by a honey-whipped sweet potato mash, and finally, a pecan praline tart topped with whipped cream fraiche. Candles flickered on the table, casting warm light across the polished surface. As I lifted my glass to toast myself, my phone buzzed Allison's voicemail. I didn't listen. Instead, I raised my glass again to the empty room and savored the silent applause of solitude. That evening, I hosted a private Zoom retreat reveal for extended family who had clicked my slideshow link. I set up my laptop at the head of the dining table, lighting every candle in the room. When the call connected, 20 faces appeared in tiny windows, some sheepish, some curious, some fuming. I greeted them warmly. "Welcome, everyone. Please come in. Dinner is served." The sight of their expressions jaw-dropped. Cousins, flustered aunts was the pièce de résistance. I guided them through my meal course by course, describing flavors, textures, and the bliss of uninterrupted conversation with myself. Allison glared. Mom's eyes darted away. I endearingly sipped my soup, then said, "I hope next year one of you will host so I can join as a guest." My tone was gentle, almost tender, yet it carried a sting they could not miss. After I hung up, quiet descended. No frantic follow-ups, no additional pleas, just the echo of my closing words. I sat at the table long after dinner, cleaning my plate in deliberate, unhurried movements. Each brush of the cloth on the china felt like wiping away years of unappreciated service. The cabin clock ticked. Outside, the waterfall glowed under moonlight. In that moment, I felt powerful, valued, and profoundly at peace. Later that night, I retreated to the spa tub one last time, gazing at the glittering stars. Messages pinged sporadically: Mom's apology, Allison's terse, sorry cousin texts asking if I'd teach them next year. I read each one, allowed myself a subtle smile, and then deleted them unread. My revenge wasn't about cruelty, it was about restoring balance. By taking back my generosity, I had taught them the true weight of my kindness. As I prepared for bed, I realized the perfect revenge had not been in humiliation, but in absence, and in reclaiming my own holiday. Tomorrow, I'd return to a family changed forever. One that knew a Thanksgiving without me was simply incomplete. And that knowledge, most of all, was my finest victory. When I finally returned home late Sunday afternoon, the silence in my cottage was nearly deafening. No torn wrapping paper scattered on the floor, no sticky handprints on the fridge, and most noticeably, no frantic texts demanding I save the holiday. Instead, I walked through my front door, feeling a strange mixture of relief and anticipation. My family would have to confront the reality of their own choices before we could move forward. I started in the kitchen, opening the dishwasher and pulling out spotless plates and glasses I'd left there before I left. One by one, I set them on the counter, as though reclaiming my own space. The leftover chocolate pecan pie sat alone on the counter, a gift from the private chef at the cabin. I grabbed a fork, sliced off a big piece, and sank onto the couch, savoring the sweet mixture of crust and gooey filling. As I ate, I scrolled through my phone. There were a dozen unopened messages from Mom Allison and various cousins. I decided I'd read none of them until I felt calm enough to respond with intention rather than emotion. After a while, the first message I opened was from my cousin Megan. "Okay, Sarah. You win. We all realized how much you do every year. Sorry for taking you for granted." I typed back a simple reply. "Glad you understand. It felt good to set that boundary, no long explanations, no guilt trips, just a clear acknowledgement." Later that evening, Mom called. Hesitant, her voice shaky. "Honey, I'm sorry. We were so used to relying on you that we didn't think about how hard it was. Thanksgiving was a disaster without you." I paused before answering. All the old instinct to apologize welled up inside me, but I held it back. Instead, I said, "Thanks, Mom. I needed a break. I hope next year we share the work so I don't burn out again." She sighed, relief and shame mixing in her tone. "You're right, let's plan differently." Next came Allison's call. I braced myself for anger, but her voice sounded tired. "I'm sorry, sis." The turkey was undercooked, the kids were screaming, and Aunt June fell asleep on the floor. "I never realized how much you handled." I felt my chest soften. "It's okay. I don't expect you to be perfect. I just needed you to try." We talked through the details of her evening, how she'd burned the casserole, how Dad had claimed the stuffing tasted like cardboard, and how my nephew had finally broken a plate. We laughed about the absurdity of it all, and in that moment I felt the reservoir of goodwill refill. That same night I received another cousin text. "Can we book your cabin for next year? We'll pay and you can come visit us." I smiled. I replied, "Thanks, but I think next year we'll try hosting at Jenny's new house. I'll come as a guest." The idea of a true break this time as a participant, rather than a host, felt exciting. Over the next few days, friends came by and noticed something different. My apartment felt lighter, the air less heavy. I told them about my Thanksgiving getaway and they applauded my decision. Their encouragement reminded me that I hadn't been unreasonable. I'd simply been the family's fallback option for too long. A week later, I joined the first post-Thanksgiving gathering at Allison's apartment this time, as an invited guest. She'd ordered takeout from that fancy Mediterranean place I love, hired a couple of babysitters for the afternoon, and even cleaned her floors beforehand. When I arrived, the place smelled of roasted eggplant and garlic, and the kids greeted me with big hugs. No one asked me to cook clean or entertain. Instead, Allison handed me a glass of wine and said, "Thank you for being here." As we sat down to eat, I felt a warm pride. Not because I'd orchestrated any grand revenge, but because my family had learned to appreciate what I'd given them and to shoulder their own responsibilities. We passed dishes around, laughed about my cabin photos, and even teased each other gently. It was imperfect messy in the best way, and it felt authentic. That night, when I pulled into my driveway, I realized how much had changed in a few short weeks. The dynamic with my family wasn't the same. They knew I could walk away, and that knowledge, rather than any sense of entitlement, had shifted our relationships. I unlocked my door and stepped inside to find a small handwritten note on my coffee table. "Thank you for all you do. We love you." It wasn't signed by anyone in particular. It didn't need to be. I smiled, folded the note, and placed it in my favorite mug on the bookshelf. Then I went into the kitchen, poured myself a cup of tea, and curled up on the couch, feeling fully at home at last. And that's how I turned one simple no into a catalyst for real change, both in my home and within myself. By stepping back, I forced my family to recognize the effort I'd poured into every holiday and taught them to share the load. More importantly, I reclaimed my own time and peace of mind, and that above all was the greatest gift I could give myself. If you've ever felt taken for granted by those you love, remember, boundaries aren't selfish, they're essential. Sometimes the best way to show people your worth is to give them the chance to miss you. Thank you so much for watching. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe for more real-life tales of boundary setting and sweet justice, and ring the so you never miss an upload. I'd love to hear your experiences. Have you ever dared to say no when everyone expected yes? Share your story in the comments below. Let's keep the conversation going. Until next time, take care of yourself first, set those boundaries, and remember, your peace is worth protecting. Story 2, attending the family reunion is not worth it. We are severing our connection. My father left me that voicemail at 7:42 p.m. on a Thursday evening. No lead-up, no explanation. Only those words. The cult practiced like a memo for business. To his only daughter, it is not a message. I was done listening by then. I didn't have trembling hands. I didn't feel my heart racing. I simply felt motionless, as though it were the first time something I'd secretly suspected for years had been publicly verified. I didn't return the call. I didn't inquire as to why. I sent him a text message. 2 words. I get it. I then surreptitiously entered the loan management portal. The one connected to the business property that backed my family's third-generation enterprise was available to me. I also took my name off. The only thing preventing them from going bankrupt or expanding was that signature which was given out of trust 2 years ago. I never thought I'd have to take it back. However, I also never thought that voicemail would disown me. Less than 6 minutes passed. The burden I had been bearing for years had started to lessen by the time I rose from my desk. 13 calls from Dad, 7 from my older brother, 78 missed calls from Mom, and a voicemail from my father's accountant that ended with him yelling, "We're all there," when I woke up 36 hours later. "We must speak right away." I realized they hadn't interrupted me at that point. At last I had released them. Growing up in a family business teaches you that family is frequently a secondary priority. Richard, my father, established his business in the same manner that he established our home. Hardly any space for softness, rule after rule, brick after brick. He operated a chain of car dealerships throughout the state. I was able to read profit and loss sheets more fluently than bedtime stories by the time I was 12. By the age of 16, I was handling shop number 3's payroll during school vacations. Never was it a request. It was expected. Outsiders are not employed by us, we raise replacements, he used to say. Loyalty served as the unwritten currency and the company became the family. Decisions were not questioned by you, you didn't voice any complaints, and you most certainly didn't respond. Mason, my older brother, was the heir apparent from the beginning. He could be commended for his potential without having to fulfill any obligations. The invisible backbone, however, was me. Arranging documents, fixing his errors, and controlling his outbursts in investor meetings. My mom didn't get involved. Her duties included entertaining, grinning, and reminding me to be thankful every now and then. For what purpose? For us, your father's building. I worked hard to earn my spot for a long time. I received my Master of Business Administration. At the top of my class. Declined a lucrative offer to stay and assist in growing the company when they wanted to open a new headquarters. I got the best rates, negotiated the lease terms, and didn't think twice when the bank requested a second signer for the operating loan at the last minute. Because I was brought up to think that family was forever, I signed. That I would at last be noticed if I demonstrated my loyalty. I was mistaken. When I questioned some of Mason's expense reports last year, the cracks began to show. He had been billing private dinners as client meetings and personal trips to the company card. My father brushed it off when I brought it up to him. Avoid picking faults with your brother. He is gaining knowledge to expedite decision-making. They kicked me out of board meetings 2 months later. I was handed edited reports, given hazy updates, and told not to worry about the money. Then the invitation to the reunion arrived. In other words, it didn't. Just that voicemail cult final, which was purposefully scheduled immediately following my submission of a financial report to the bank, highlighting misappropriation of funds under Mason's name. This was no accident. There was a cover-up there, and I was no longer family. I therefore ceased to be their safety net. At that point, things really started to fall apart. The signs were everywhere looking back. However, you become fluent in denial when you grow up yearning for approval. Subtle was the first real crack. I brought up the fact that one of our vendors had submitted duplicate invoices totaling roughly $12,000 in expenses over 3 months during a routine budget review meeting. Anticipating a speedy resolution, I flagged it right away. Mason, however, chuckled. It's one of my friends. Let it go. Later, we'll have better terms. After the meeting, I mentioned it to my father. Calmly, in a professional manner. He kept his head down at his desk. You must quit behaving like an outsider, I muttered. I couldn't get that word out of my head for weeks. Outsider. Despite overseeing 4 expansions worth of logistics, I was still a liability if I asked too many questions, even after renegotiating our fleet lease at half the price and maintaining our books spotless for 6 years. My access to back-end systems gradually decreased after that conversation. I was first taken off of vendor communications. After that, I was unable to log into the loan dashboard. They gave me a company credit card, but it expired and was never replaced. Whenever I inquired, I was informed that there was a temporary reallocation or system update. Mason, however, received a new office chair that was more expensive than my first vehicle. On my home computer, I began to maintain a private folder. I reactivated an old contact banker who owed me a favor and jokingly requested to look over the loan arrangement of the business. I didn't find anything shocking, it's just disappointing. 2 names were used to underwrite the loan that we had taken out 2 years prior to enter regional markets, and that was meant to secure our future. Both mine and my father's, and the payments are hardly being made. The collateral was owned by the company. The terms were worse than near default. Because I had great credit, my name was being used to appease creditors. Since I was debt-free, since I was the one in charge. I wasn't even getting the truth, though. I began gathering as much information as I could, including internal spending reports, emails Mason sent me, and documentation of the fund's allocation. I realized then that this was more than just betrayal. Strategic exploitation was what it was. Until I told the bank the truth, they had been gradually removing me from the family while keeping me close enough to profit from my signature until they no longer needed me. All of a sudden, I was no longer family. When I received the voicemail, I was inconvenient. I wasn't broken by it. I was given permission to do what I had already begun to prepare for, and it validated everything I already knew. I didn't react with emotion. I refrained from arguing. I didn't inquire as to why. Rather, I inhaled deeply. opened my laptop, and clicked into the digital copy of the loan agreement I had signed 2 years prior inside the secure folder I had named Redemption Plan. Proof of improper use of the loan. My correspondence with the bank. Danielle had written a request for termination weeks prior. It's Danielle from law school again. In a previous life, the woman had assisted Elena in overthrowing her husband. Some relationships are worthwhile. I had gone over the terms several times with Danielle. I had not signed in as a guarantor, but as a co-op applicant. This meant that the bank had to notify the company and requalify the loan if I formally withdrew my name prior to restructuring. Their financial situation deteriorated without me. One thing Danielle said stuck with me. Don't yell, Warren, don't. Simply shift the brick supporting the wall and allow it to drop. So, I did just that. I made the withdrawal online. 4 minutes passed. I then sent the bank an email. My proof that I was being purposefully excluded included vendor fraud, personal financial mismanagement, and modifications to my access. Within an hour, the bank silently froze the account. Not a word to them. To examine the anomalies, they required time. In fact, they were rushing to figure out how dangerous this loan had suddenly become. I also called the accountant while they rushed. Not my father's, but mine. I described the circumstances. We discussed asset protection, the impact on my personal credit, and my exposure. The week before, I would transfer my savings into a trust. Now my credit lines were blocked. They were unable to touch me. After removing my name, I waited for 36 hours. The messages began. Missed calls from my mother. Mason's messages. How on earth did you do that? Now Dad is emailing me. Immediate. And lastly, a trembling, panicked voicemail from his accountant. The loan is going to fail. Support was withdrawn by the banks. We could go into default. Now is the time to fix this. I gave it 2 plays. It sounded like justice, not because I didn't understand. As well as justice. It doesn't scream when it gets there. It reverberates. The first call I answered was from my mother. Her voice wavered, but not out of rage, but out of desperation. My dear, what's going on? According to your father, the bank is freezing accounts in case they decide to recall the loan. They said you signed something. I stayed silent for a moment, then said, I removed my name, that's all. Her breath caught. But you can't just do that. Actually, I can, and I did. Elena, she whispered. This affects all of us. No, I replied gently. You made sure it didn't click. I didn't know them explained actions. No more. The next day, the family business's accounts were officially marked as non-compliant. The bank sent a formal notice of default review citing evidence of financial misconduct and unauthorized transactions. Mason was listed as the primary financial officer. He tried to blame it on a clerical error. It didn't work. Vendors started pulling out. A local news site ran a Quiet Peace family auto chain. Faces financial turmoil amid internal disputes. I didn't leak the story, but I knew who did. Danielle said it best when she called to update me. When people lose power, they look for someone to blame. They just didn't expect that person to have already walked away. The voicemails became more aggressive from Dad. You ungrateful child. We built that business for you. You're ruining your future from Mason. You think you're so clever. But you'll need us someday from the accounting again. Do you understand what this means? You've destroyed their legacy. What none of them could admit was that they had destroyed it long before I pulled out. They destroyed it when they used my name but denied me a seat at the table. They destroyed it when they decided I was a threat, not a daughter. They destroyed at the moment. They made me invisible. Now the loan was caving in. The trust between partners, gone. The business teetering on collapse, and I was untouched. No legal backlash, no financial liability, just clean credit and a quieter inbox. I forwarded the last voicemail to Danielle and deleted the rest. And then I took my phone off silent for the first time in 2 days. Because the storm they created was no longer my responsibility to clean up. They called a family meeting not because they wanted to fix things, but because they had finally realized I was the only one who could. They picked the same restaurant we used for birthdays growing up. Same private room. Same table near the fireplace. But this time there were no balloons, no toasts, no laughter. Just Dad, Mom, Mason, and an empty chair waiting for me as if they still believed they had the right to summon me. I walked in 15 minutes late on purpose. Mason stood as I entered. Thanks for coming. I didn't come for you, I said, taking a seat. Let's not waste each other's time. Dad leaned forward. You made your point loud and clear. No, I said calmly. The bank made my point. I just stopped protecting your lie. His jaw tensed. We're trying to hold this together. You think you're punishing us, but you're punishing the legacy your grandfather built. Grandpa didn't build a legacy, I replied. He built a garage. You turned it into a dictatorship. Mason scoffed. Oh, come on. We gave you everything. I looked him dead in the eye. You gave me a job, not a voice. The silence that followed was suffocating. Finally, my mother spoke quietly. What do you want, Elena? And that was the question, wasn't it? What did I want? Not revenge. I had already taken that. What I wanted was clarity. I stood, placing a sealed envelope on the table. This is a signed affidavit confirming I've permanently withdrawn from the company loan, the board, and all business operations. You will never use my name again. Dad opened his mouth. I'm not finished, I said. I'm also submitting an anonymous tip to the state auditor. There are funds missing. Vendors' unpaid payroll inconsistencies. It's your mess now. Fully, legally. Mason's face went red. Your ego destroys us. No, I said, gathering my handbag. Nothing is being destroyed by me. All I'm doing is taking away the appearance that I ever participated. My father said the most unexpected thing I had ever heard as I was heading for the door. Please, Elena. I paused out of satisfaction rather than hesitancy. Then, without looking back, I said, You informed me via voicemail that we were done. I am merely formally agreeing with you. I then turned to leave. Walking away didn't feel like a fall despite my expectation that it would. It was like breathing in a room without air rationing for the first time. In years, for the first time, I didn't check my inbox for fires I didn't start when I woke up. There weren't a lot of meetings on my calendar. My phone didn't ring unless someone genuinely wanted to talk to me and I wasn't asked to speak. I relocated downtown to a tiny loft with open windows, peaceful mornings, and enough room for a desk and my mental well-being. I began working as a consultant for small female-run businesses, assisting them in making decisions that I was never permitted to do. The skills I honed in silence turned out to be invaluable and in the right hands. I was asked why I left the family business by one of my first clients. I told her because I no longer conflate respect with usefulness. She gave a nod as if she had heard those words before. I frequently saw Danielle. She persisted in trying to persuade me to begin an official relationship when we first met over coffee. A boutique company that assists women in protecting their futures and escaping toxic business relationships. Because sometimes you study a shit and sometimes you burn it down, we drew the names Anchor and Flame on a napkin. Our first 3 clients in less than a month included not only women from failed relationships but also daughters, wives, and sisters who had been told they were a part of something until they dared to demand control. I didn't die helping them. I had already done that, it reminded me. I didn't require my brother's respect, my father's apology, or acknowledgement from those who had taught me to shrink. Freedom, not inheritance or legacy, was what they never gave me, and freedom doesn't accept anything less once it's tasted. I received one last envelope from the family business 3 months after the courtroom had finally settled. Neither Mason nor my father gave it to me. The bank sent it. There was a plain letter inside. The business loan associated with your name has been settled and transferred in full. There are no more obligations. Thank you, but no. Don't apologize, just legality and a neat line inked. I grinned. Not everyone who has harmed you can bring you closure. Occasionally it appears as a final balanced statement that is entirely zeros. I slid the letter into the back of my cabinet and put it in a file that was marked complete. I opened the window wide and placed a candle on the windowsill of my loft that evening. The city hummed outside, far away but alive. I thought about that voicemail one last time. Don't bother coming to the reunion. We are severing our connection. They wanted silence, obedience, absence, ajmad. And they got all 3. They didn't anticipate, however, that I would flourish in that quiet, that I would build something not out of revenge but out of truth, that I would become more than the invisible daughter they used for signatures and silence. I poured myself a glass of wine. Opened the latest client file, scribbled a note to a woman named Mira, whose husband had locked her out of their bakery's books. Under it, I wrote, You're not difficult, you're just finally visible. The candle flickered, the air moved. The city didn't stop, and neither would I. And that was the last time I thought of it as cutting ties. Because ties can strangle. But letting go. Letting go is how you learn to stand alone and still stand tall. Story 3. There were 40 guests. The backyard was illuminated by fairy lights, the music was playing softly, and everyone was clinking glasses as if we were the ideal family. When my dad's sharp, loud, and degrading voice pierced the air, I was standing there with a polite smile and a drink that I hadn't even touched. "It's time to sell that fucking house, Sarah. The loan your brother took out won't be repaid." I froze my fingers around the glass. Discussions ended. Everyone turned in our direction. I chuckled uneasily, hoping that perhaps just possibly he would also chuckle and claim it was a joke. However, no. His eyes were intensely serious. I glanced at my mother. She didn't flinch at all, simply stood there as if she concurred with him. Telling your daughter to discard the one thing she created with her own blood and sweat in order to save her brother seems like the most natural thing in the world. I said nothing at all. Something snapped inside me, but not yet. They assumed that I would remain silent as I always had, and accept it just as I had hundreds of times before when they made me feel inferior to their golden boy. However, I finished playing the obedient daughter this time. I looked at my brother Ryan, who was standing there looking like he should be on a magazine cover wearing a branded shirt and a fake Rolex. In actuality, he was unable to cover his growing debt, let alone his auto loan. He didn't even appear embarrassed. He simply grinned, as if he knew I would give in. Perhaps I would have too. I still yearned for their approval years ago. I used to believe that family meant silence and sacrifice, but she was no longer that version of herself. I put my glass down gently and pretended to be at ease, but there was thundering in my heart, not out of fear. Oh no, from self-control, because I felt like screaming. The injustice of it all made me want to shout at the top of my lungs. However, I didn't. All I had to do was smile and utter the 7 words that caused everyone in that backyard to stop breathing. "Next, begin packing. You have 30 days. My father's face contorted. "What are you discussing?" I cocked my head, relishing the occasion. "You're not really sure, are you?" the throng whispered. There were whispers in the air. My mother appeared perplexed. My brother's mouth tightened. Leaning slightly, I spoke in a cool tone. "Now that you've been residing in my home, I want it returned." My ears ached from the thick silence, and I realized this was only the beginning as their faces went white in the string lights. They believed they knew who I was. However, I was going to do something that no one had ever thought of. Because I was quiet, courteous, and never made a scene, people always thought I had it easy. I must have been the most popular kid. They were mistaken. It had been Ryan from the start. Ryan with the fake charm and the large brown eyes. He appeared to be wearing a high-end suit. He was born to be great according to my parents. They blamed the world each time he failed. They pretended it was luck each time I was successful. I received all A's. They gave a nod. Ryan received a C- for passing. Let's rejoice. By the time I was 15, I had figured it out because he worked so hard. In our home, the rules weren't applied uniformly. Ryan played video games while I prepared dinner. He kept dropping out of every college he enrolled in, so I studied for scholarships while they repeatedly covered his tuition. And I remained silent. I had 2 jobs during my time in college. Ryan was too stressed to cook, so his mother packed his favorite Bernie for him, and he arrived home late with sore feet. When his old car was repossessed, they had to spend some of their retirement money to buy him a new one. Dad gave me a look like I was begging him to sell a kidney when I asked for a small loan to help with the down payment for a studio apartment. "You are self-sufficient, Sarah," he said. "You always manage to figure it out. We're not concerned about you." I was struck by that line. "We're not concerned about you." Before I realized it was code for "you're on your own," it sounded like a compliment. I came home to find Ryan in the living room, jobless once more, telling our parents about his new startup idea, even though I had secured a full-time job shortly after graduation. And they clapped like seals of pride once more. Within 6 months, that startup was a failure. And guess who once more made his credit card payments? They expected me to, but not me. Silently. As usual. One night, I recall, it's pouring rain outside. After staying late at work, I was soaked when I got home. Every step made my shoes squeak. "Don't drip everywhere," my mother said as I entered the kitchen. "Ryan is sleeping. Avoid waking him." I gave up trying to fit in at that point. I began making plans for my own life. Inch by inch, I kept all of the bonuses, lived below my income. Don't share my accomplishments since they weren't honored anyhow. I eventually purchased my own home. The house of my dreams. No cosigners, no freebies. Only me, as well as when I broke the news. I was asked to place it in the family trust by Dad. Mom asked if Ryan could maybe move into the guest room just for a few months. That's when I knew, to them, I was the backup plan. The emotional punching bag, the golden daughter turned scapegoat. But I wasn't going to be silent anymore. They built their world on the assumption I'd always be the one to sacrifice. Now I was going to show them what happened when the quiet one stops playing nice. It wasn't just a house, it was mine. Every brick, every polished floorboard, every key on that ring represented years of hustling, of swallowing my pride of hearing no and still pushing forward. I didn't have a fairy godmother, no rich uncle, no secret inheritance. Just a spreadsheet, sheer willpower, and a silent promise to myself. One day, I'll walk into a place that no one can take from me, and I did. The day I got the keys, I cried alone in the empty living room. No champagne, no cheering family, just me and the walls that now held space for my freedom. But freedom in my family came with strings. When I first mentioned the house, my mom's first words weren't, "You have my admiration." They were, "While so far from the city. Are you sure it's safe there alone?" Translation? "Why didn't you let us control this too?" A week later, Ryan stopped by with my dad. He walked through the house like he was doing me a favor, pointing out things like this. "Kitchen's nice. You could totally Airbnb the basement and help with our situation." Our situation? What he meant was his mess. His fourth failed business, the luxury SUV. He couldn't pay off the personal loan that was now threatening to tank his credit score. Then came the bombshell. Dad sat me down and said with all the fake calm in the world, "Look, sweetheart, we've always supported each other in this family. It's time you step up. Sell this place. Use the money to get Ryan back on his feet. Your turn to help?" All right. I stared at him, trying not to laugh or cry. My turn, as if I hadn't been silently helping my whole life while Ryan ran through every opportunity like it was a toy he got bored of. I nodded slowly. "Okay, I'll think about it." And they thought they'd won. But in my mind, something dark and razor sharp had already started forming. I wasn't going to sell, not even close. Instead, I made a quiet call to my real estate lawyer. I asked him how to set up a private LLC. I transferred the deed into it, made sure nothing was traceable to me publicly. Then I made another call to a property manager. I told them I was moving abroad for work and needed someone to handle the house. In truth, I was moving just 15 minutes away into a small rental nearby so I could watch everything unfold. 3 weeks later, I handed over the keys to my parents. I'm going to lease the place for a while. I told them, "You guys can stay here rent-free for now. Just help me keep it in shape." Their eyes lit up like they'd won the lottery. I smiled because they had no idea. The clock had already started ticking. The day I moved out of my own house, no one saw it coming. I packed my things in silence. No drama, no teary goodbyes. Just one suitcase, a laptop bag, and a card. The felt foreign after years of swallowing rage. I left behind the custom furniture, the plush rugs, even the artwork I had saved for months to buy. It wasn't giving up, it was bait. My parents had moved in 2 days prior. They were still getting comfortable, already complaining about the water pressure and saying the lighting wasn't warm enough. Dad had dragged Ryan's old gaming chair into the living room like belonged in a museum. Meanwhile, I slipped away into a simple rental. At least that's what I let them believe. It was a modest house in a quiet neighborhood with a small garden out front. Tidy, unfussy, peaceful. But here's the twist. I own this one too. Bought it under a different LLC. Different address on the paperwork, different name on the mailbox. It was all legal, invisible. My second home was mine, hidden in plain sight. I even had fake lease papers made just in case they snooped. The next week, I invited Mom for tea, hoping to drive the nail in further. She looked around the humble place and barely concealed her smirk. "Bit of a downgrade, isn't it?" she said, sipping her chai with that sweet-coated venom only mothers can perfect. "But at least you're learning to live within your limits." I grinned. "Yeah, you know I'm trying." Dad came by later that week, brought me leftovers like I was a charity case. "Hard to see you here after that beautiful house," he said with a sigh. "But at least you're not paying a mortgage anymore." I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I let them believe it all, that I was broke, that I'd sold the house for Ryan, that I had once again played the dutiful daughter who gave up her dreams for her family. And that's what stunned them the most. They thought I had nothing left. Ryan came over one day, tossed his car keys on my table like I was still the family. "Help. You know, he said I might need some help with the insurance on my BMW." "Things are tight." I nodded like a broken doll, of course. Then I turned off my phone for the rest of the day. The truth was, every visit, every smug smile from them was feeding the fire I had been building. Not out of hate, but clarity. They needed to believe I was down and out because when the curtain dropped, I wanted the gas to hit their lungs like ice water. This wasn't just a plan, this was a performance. And the best scenes were yet to come. The backyard was lit with fairy lights, laughter, and the kind of smug joy that made my stomach churn. It was Ryan's lone celebration party. Yes, that's what they called it. Apparently, my parents had miraculously managed to get his debts paid off, and tonight was a toast to his fresh start. They acted like they'd saved the world. Not a single soul knew they were living in the house. They thought I had sacrificed. Not one person knew the truth. I stayed quiet all evening. Polite smile, silent laughter. For hours, I nursed a single glass of sparkling water, but my parents were enjoying the attention. Every time they complimented their golden son, their voices rose. For her brother, she sacrificed everything. It was loud enough for the neighbors to hear Mom say that about Nazreen. Sold the home of her dreams. What a selfless girl we raised. She prioritizes her family above all else. Dad smirked at me and continued, as if I were a dutiful servant receiving a trophy for my participation. Then it took place in the center of the backyard. Ryan was discussing redemption and second chances while intoxicated. To get attention, my dad clinked his glass. He gestured toward me as if I were a dog and said, "I just want to take a moment to acknowledge my daughter. She gave up everything, sold her home, her hope for the future of her brother." Everyone gave a clap, 40 people cheering a lie. Then he said it. Something deep inside me was snapped by that line. She did it without hesitation, and truthfully, I have no doubt that she will step up if we ever need her again. That's the role of family. Laughter, gnats, glasses clinking again. Slowly, I got to my feet. My hands remained steady. I didn't break my voice. I had mentally practiced this moment 1,000 times. Dad, you're right. Family does that. I glanced at the throng. However, family does not deceive, control, and steal. The only kid to ever stand up for herself. There was silence in the backyard. After inhaling, I turned to face my parents. Ryan's loan was never paid back by you. I did, but I didn't sell my home. My mom blinked as if I had given her a slap. I didn't sell it. Louder now, I said. I still own the home where I currently reside. That is also mine. Both under separate LLCs, both in my name. I'm not broke. I never was. My father's jaw clenched. What do you say I'm saying? I stepped forward. You believe I gave up your tenants in the house you currently occupy, as well as your landlord. I'm giving you 30 days notice to vacate. The color drained from their faces. Someone gasped. I looked at the stunned crowd and smiled. I've played the humble daughter long enough. It's time I lived like the woman I actually am. Then I sat down, sipped my sparkling water, and let the silence thunder louder than applause ever could. The days after the backyard party were like walking through a battlefield. Except I was the only one still standing. My phone blew up the next morning. Missed calls from Mom, voicemails from Dad. Even Ryan had the audacity to text me calling me dramatic for exposing the truth in front of everyone. He said I should have kept it in the family, as if keeping it in the family hadn't already burned me to the bone. But I stayed silent. Let them sit in the discomfort. A week later, a formal notice was delivered to the house. My house by my lawyer. It was a clean, polite, legally worded eviction. 30 days to vacate. With instant effect. No threats, no nastiness, just business. Mom called instantly. This time she didn't yell, she begged. Sarah, sweetheart, please, where will we go? How could you do this to your own parents? I didn't recoil. The same way you guilt me into giving up everything. I replied, karma's glass. That house was my reward for a decade of sacrifice. You treated it like a pawn. I'm just taking back what was always mine. Dad didn't call, he sent an email, one line. You've embarrassed this family. I didn't reply to that either. I didn't have to. Meanwhile, word spread like wildfire through the family. Aunties called to check in, which really meant gather gossip. Cousins who hadn't messaged me in years suddenly popped up with "you go girl" texts. Some admired me, some judged me, none of it mattered. The best part? The tenants they had unknowingly mocked. My neighbors started treating me differently. One even stopped me in the grocery store. You're the one who gave them 30 days, right? That was brave. I just smiled and nodded. Some debts can't be paid in silence anymore. 2 weeks before move out, I passed by the house. Dad was sitting on the porch, shoulders hunched. He looked smaller than I remembered, like the weight of entitlement was finally crushing him. I didn't stop. Instead, I drove past in my quiet car windows up, music playing low. I wasn't looking for revenge anymore. I was honoring my own survival. Ryan tried once more, showing up at my rental doorstep. He had that fake soft tone he always used when he needed something. You've made your point, he said. But there are parents, Sarah. You can't just kick them out. I can, I said firmly. And I am. He scoffed. You used to be so loyal." I cocked my head. "No, Ryan. I used to be so blind." By the time the final week rolled around, the house was nearly empty. Furniture gone, curtains taken down. The dream I had once built and offered a shelter to those who never deserved it was finally mine again. Not just a name, but in power. And when day 30 came, I stood at the gate as they drove off. Not a word was exchanged, but their silence was louder than any apology they never gave. It didn't take long for Ryan's carefully spun web of lies to start unraveling. Turns out being bailed out once just gave him the confidence to dig a deeper hole without my parents' roof over their heads or their fantasy that I'd always come through. They all began to feel what real pressure tasted like. And Ryan, he cracked first. First, there was a phone call. Over lunch, my coworker Asher, whose cousin was employed at the same financial firm Ryan claimed to be consulting for, revealed the truth, something I was not supposed to hear. Leaning in as if to drop a bombshell, she said, "Sarah, there was never a real job for your brother. He was working under the table on dubious referrals. He is reportedly under investigation for applying for private loans under client names." I blinked. Which loans? When things go wrong, they need someone else to pay for it. Even though I shouldn't have been shocked, it still made me shiver. The boy with the golden hair. All this time, he had been a walking debt grenade. I received an email from an unfamiliar lawyer 2 weeks later. One of Ryan's old investors, apparently. On a loan that Ryan had forged, he was named as a co-guarantor. They had been digging and my name had come up. Thank God I legally separated all of my assets under LLCs years ago, which is the only reason I wasn't involved. Every penny, every home. Untouchable. I blocked the number and forwarded the email to my own lawyer. After a local news report about small-scale financial fraud, Ryan's bank account was frozen and his car was repossessed by the end of that month. Watching the TV screen show was unreal. My parents were sitting in their rental apartment, which they could hardly afford with their pensions, when he was photographed. Mom called in tears. She cried, "This family is cursed. Why are we experiencing this?" However, I didn't reply sympathetically. I answered honestly. "Mom, this isn't a curse. This is the result. You regarded me like a purse and Ryan like a prince, and now he's financially and morally bankrupt." Dad didn't call. He was overly arrogant. However, Uncle Tamara informed me that he had been looking into legal options for bringing a lawsuit against his daughter. It nearly made me chuckle. Why would you sue me taking responsibility for my life? They no longer believed that Ryan would ever save them. Their meticulously crafted kingdom, which was founded on denial, lies, and favoritism, fell apart without that illusion. The irony. The daughter they had previously rejected had turned into an untouchable. And they crowned the son. Now all he was a headline. Despite witnessing the disintegration of everything, they never expressed gratitude, never apologized. Not once. However, I no longer required their apology because years of pleading had failed to accomplish what the truth had. They experienced what it was like to be helpless. And for me, that was sufficient justice. 6 months later, I stood barefoot, coffee in hand, peace wrapped around me like silk in front of tall glass windows that overlooked the ocean. For the first time in years, I wasn't anticipating the next blow as the sun warmed my face. I was just getting by. In addition to being stunning, the house was a work of art that I had personally designed. Each and every tile, artwork, and peaceful nook. I was reflected in it. It was the woman who ultimately made the decision for herself, not the sister who was ignored, or the daughter who stumbled into silence out of guilt. What's the best part? They didn't know. After my alleged fall from grace, I was still renting a modest house in their opinion. They believed that I had given up everything. They were unaware that I had only let them go. I was seen leaving a private business event by Andy, who always had more opinions and manners, and a friend of my mother's. One evening, she noticed the press, the photographer, and the car as they took pictures for a feature on women in leadership. My mother sent me a message the following day. "We didn't know you own your own company," or 3 followed by your new house. "Does that magazine have that one shoot no apology?" No. We were wrong. Just the startled knowledge that they were no longer even involved in the story, and that the daughter they had once treated like an ATM had turned into a force of nature. It had a poetic quality. Following his legal troubles and public humiliation, Ryan also made an attempt to make a comeback. He was doing freelance consulting, which was just code for begging people to trust him again. He sent me an email. "Hey sis, maybe we could grab coffee sometime. Talk catch up." I stared at the screen for a moment, then deleted it. No reply. No need. Because here's the thing. This wasn't a revenge story. This was a rebirth. I had built more than a business. I had built freedom. My team respected me, my clients trusted me. I mentored young women who reminded me of my younger self, hungry, capable, and tired of being told to be quiet. My final move wasn't to destroy them. It was to become someone they'd never reach again. At a charity gala weeks later, I accepted an award for community entrepreneurship. The room was full of leaders, mentors, people who saw me for who I really was. As I stepped off the stage, a woman approached me, slightly older, tearful, a mother of 2 daughters. "You give people like us hope," she whispered. That was the moment I knew. Everything I went through, the betrayal, the heartbreak, the silence, it wasn't in vain. It had carved me into someone unbreakable, someone real. They underestimated me, but I never did. And now I was no longer the golden daughter. They dismissed. I was the woman they could never forget.